On the Hill. Kilmeny, thank you. I want to bring in our panel this morning, Professor of Middle East Studies at Florida Atlantic University, Dr. Robert Rabil, and retired U.S. Navy SEAL Officer Mike Sarraille. Good morning, gentlemen. Good to have you on.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
So today would technically mark this 60-day deadline for President Trump to have to go to Congress, get support for this conflict. You heard Hegseth yesterday saying he believes that the ceasefire really extends the war powers deadline. Mike, is he right? Or is the fact that there is still a blockade in place, does that mean we're still at war?
It does. So no president can extend the War Powers Act on 60 days just because there's a ceasefire. Now, he gets 60 days and potentially gets 30 days beyond that to safely wind down or reposition forces. Now, the argument they're making is that the ceasefire ended active hostilities, and so that the clock resets or the clock no longer applies. And that may be politically useful. And Shannon, I would do the same thing in their case, but legally loose.
Yeah, we'll see how the political maneuvering shakes out. Dr. Rabil, should our Congress refuse to continue supporting the action in Iran, is all hope for a free Iran lost?
Ms. Cake, let me say this. I think the Congress is wrong. If history is any indication, the President of the United States have used their power to have secure navigation in the world. Just, I would like to remind some. President Jefferson, he sent his Navy vessels to combat the Barbary states and to secure the freedom of Mediterranean, the freedom of navigation in the Mediterranean. President Wilson spoke in his famous 14-point about the responsibility of United States to secure the freedom of navigation. President Roosevelt in World War II, before even going in World War II, he said it falls up in United States and its allies to secure the navigation of the sea. So really, as a matter of fact, the president is right, and his president is mainly trying to open that straits, which the Iranians link to what's happening in the Iran. So from my perspective, as a matter of fact, I feel that United States is right, and I don't think United States needs to go and say, listen, I have a pause or no pause. We have something here. It is our responsibility to do, and we have been doing it. And history has shown us the President of the United States and the greater President of the United States, they have done this before.
Well,
this is my view, Ms.
We can have principle and policy, certainly, but when politics gets in the way, you never know what can happen. So my question, Dr. Rabil, is if Congress were to revoke funding and support for this conflict in Iran, do you see any pathway for peace for the Iranian people?
As a matter of fact, peace for the Iranian people, it's a little bit complex, because as long as the regime is there, Ms. Cake, it's difficult for the Iranians to have peace. This regime knows only, one single way of doing business, which is oppression. And I know about the regime very well and what has done throughout the region. So as long as the regime is in power, I don't think the Iranian people will have peace.
And this is the closest we've come to toppling that regime in the last 50 years. Mike, to you now. President Trump, he joined Greta Van Susteren last evening over the phone. He painted a picture of the pressure campaign that he's using in Iran. Listen to the president.
But looking at the Iran war, haven't you already won? I mean, isn't it? I mean,
we've already
what
won.
More?
We've already won, but I want to win by a bigger margin. But we have destroyed their Navy, destroyed their Air Force, destroyed all of their, if you look at their anti-aircraft equipment, their radar equipment, their leadership is destroyed. We've destroyed everything. If we leave right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild if they ever could rebuild. But it's actually not good enough. We have to have guarantees they will never have a nuclear weapon.
So, Mike, we're close. We are close. Of course, we got briefed by the military yesterday on options. I'll get to that in just a minute. But the president is still maintaining you have a choice, get to a deal or it's total collapse.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with my panelists. Regardless of what the left and maybe a majority of what Congress believe, this was the morally right choice. After 47 years of belligerent behavior in death to America, Finally, we have a president that is going to take this on, and we cannot stop him from reaching a full solution. So Congress needs to give him the authorization under the AUMF, authorized use of military force, limited AUMF with clear goals to finish this task. But don't be surprised in what President Trump has, is it may go to strikes, then back to diplomacy, back to strikes, back to diplomacy, until Iran signs the deal and ends their nuclear proliferation altogether, as well as their regional strike capability and disruption.
Part of the military plan here was incorporating this economic noose that we placed around Iran. Dr. Rabil, how close is that collapse that the president is suggesting is coming? You know, we've heard the people, they don't have food, they don't have jobs, they don't have money. What do you know about the economic conditions right now?
Well, it's very serious, Ms. Cake. The value, mainly the value of the currency has just gone. There is no value. And indeed, you have little food. You have no power in many places in Iran. Really, the way where they are going to store the oil now, I don't know where they are going to store the oil. So they are facing a very serious problem. And again, let's not forget the blockade is winning in a very important way in that Iran cannot import and export. So even, and I think myself, if the president decides on extending by 30 days, those 30 days, they are going to reveal to us how bad the regime is doing. And I'm hoping really the regime comes forward and sign, merely an agreement with the United States. We'll see that. But bearing in mind, I think that from my perspective, I think that the president has still every right to go ahead and resume fighting, including, whatever remains from the military infrastructure of the Iranian regime. Yeah,
well, he got a briefing yesterday. The president got that military briefing on his options at this point. Axios is reporting that they have three options. CENTCOM showed him three options: a short and powerful wave of infrastructure strikes, to your point, Dr. Rabil, and then just, a total break in the deadlock here, then a military takeover, or, part of the Strait of Hormuz, trying to reopen shipping, just take it over militarily. That could involve ground forces. That was a second option. And then a special forces operation to secure the uranium, right, the stockpile. Mike, what do you make of these options on the table, and should Karg Island be part of the equation?
It could be, and maybe it should be. We all know that 90% of their oil comes from Karg Island, so that is a strategic, an economically strategic piece of property to Iran. And it may be a combination of all three courses of action. The uranium, which we have to get physical custody of. We can't trust Iran to say, hey, we'll dispose of it. Alongside the UAEA is a must. Now, that is a complex operation that would require some substantial time on the ground and basically an excavation. So there are some defensive concerns there, but the military is up to it. And what Trump is doing economically, guys, I don't foresee, if they choose to strike, more than 2 to 3 days before they go back to the negotiation table and Iran realizes they cannot sustain this economically.
Mike, tell me about this new hypersonic missile being, chatted about. They're talking about using it. It's called the Dark Eagle. CENTCOM wants to use it. What is it? What does it do?
So I didn't know it was operational yet. It's been going through testing. But the hypersonic missiles would be especially effective. Now, what has Iran done? They've moved their residual strike capability, their missile capability, further east away from American forces. So that distance alone, that's where those Dark Eagle hypersonic missiles would come into play. And there's no better testing ground to prove them than in this conflict and strike that residual strike capability of Iran.
So it'd be more specific, more targeted? Is it my understanding that's how the military playing field would change or shift?
So the Dark Eagles have a longer distance. They are precision munitions.
Okay.
But they can strike into far eastern Iran to eliminate what missile capability remains for Iran.
Understood. It makes sense to roll it out if we have that capability right now. CENTCOM, meanwhile, Dr. Rabil pushing out these images. 44 commercial vessels have been now directed to turn around, return to port. And the president, he talked to reporters, we mentioned that yesterday, about potential peace talks still. He's still holding on to that potential. So listen to the president, and I'll get you on the other side.
I always like face-to-face. I consider it better. But when you have to fly 18 hours every time you want to have a meeting, and you know what the meeting is all about, and you know they're going to give you a piece of paper that you don't like before you even leave, it's ridiculous. They've come a long way. The question is whether or not they're going to go far enough.
And then Dr. Rabil, yesterday, Israel's prime minister coming out saying basically talks are going nowhere. Is it time, you suggested a moment ago, it's just time to end the talking?
Well, as a matter of fact, I will leave it up to the president and up to what the Iranians are sending to the Pakistani and us, because I believe, let me say this, because I monitor what the Iranians are doing. Probably the proposal that they just, said to the United States, it's kind of a little bit tricky for us. And let me explain to you how. I think probably this is a scenario. They will agree to some form of a deal of the nuclear weapon, laying out on what the Democrats are doing so as to separate the ballistic program from the nuclear program. So why? Because this will align with their past history. Their past history where mainly their importance lied with keeping the ballistic missiles and separating the ballistic missile program from the nuclear file. So really, as a matter of fact, the president, and I have full faith in him, he has to be careful with that. My thing is that he has to pair, he has to link not only the nuclear weapon alone, the nuclear weapon and the ballistic missile program, which are extremely important. And I think, yes, he could have, again, the negotiation going, because the president said it. I'm going to give you a good deal.
Sure.
You go ahead, you sign, and we'll go ahead and we'll offer a new page. So this option, it's still open there.
Professor Robert Rabil, Mike Sarraille, gentlemen, thanks for making us smarter this morning. Great conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Good to see you both. From our crime desk, meanwhile.